Hey! I'm Cooper.
And I'm Karen.
You're listening to
You Want Me to Do What?
A conversation between a millennial trainer, that's me, and his boomer client.
That's me.
As we take our gym floor conversations to the recording studio.
Listen in our informative conversations where we'll guide you through 4 phases of habit change, from contemplation to maintenance and beyond.
Through each episode, learn about the intersection of generations and discover how, at the end of the day, we're more similar than we realize.
Grab a front row seat to our sometimes hilarious stories about our personal experiences as we move through each phase.
Join us as we reflect on our unlikely friendship, our cultural differences, and certainly that big age gap.
We hope you see it's never too early or too late to be your best self. So if you're considering making changes to your health or fitness, or you've already started, this podcast is certainly for you. Welcome.
So last time, in episode 2, we introduced preparation and determination, the second phase of our behavior change conversation. We discussed the good news and bad news of deciding to make changes toward healthier habits. In today's episode, Help Me Understand, we'll continue to explore the preparation phase with an emphasis on the research aspect.
Yeah, that's right. Today, what we're going to do is talk about the differences in the accessibility of information around and about creating and maintaining healthier habits, and more specifically, the difference between the information available today versus decades ago, and how I feel us baby boomers we're seriously at a disadvantage by the lack of information, and how at this point in our lives, I think it's really played a big part and a high percentage of us having one or more chronic diseases to deal with.
There is a whole lot more information on health and wellness out there than there's ever been in the past, and it's constantly growing. This podcast is now included. And I think as a good way of setting up our mindset when tackling this topic, I wanted to go back to reference something I had mentioned in our first episode, particularly when it relates to millennials.
Okay.
Now, I had presented the picture of my generation kind of being resigned to the aging process rather than being proactive with developing and maintaining healthy habits.
Okay.
We mentioned how millennials seem to lack that sense of urgency you talked about having as a boomer.
Yep.
Which was one of the main factors driving you to take action and change habits.
Mm-hmm.
But since that episode, I've had some time to reflect on that more and perform some research. I mentioned I know a lot of people getting married, settling down, starting families, because when you hit your 30s, apparently that's what happens.
Yeah, par for the course.
And mind you, I hear both sides, because some new parents will say they don't have extra time. And then I have a client who literally just took their newborn home the other day. And I know that because they told me in the gym during our next scheduled workout.
Now, that's an interesting statement, because typically, I mean, if somebody brings home a newborn, they're kind of out of commission for weeks on end.
Yeah.
So was this a person who was always just super disciplined in their life about fitness and working out?
Yeah, I'd say so. And I asked,
so it was just their life. It literally was their lifestyle.
Yeah.
So so they would probably have felt not like themselves had they not come in.
Yeah, I mean, there are some who also had been pretty good about training, and then had a baby.
Life starts lifing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's definitely people who kind of have it installed in their list of higher priorities. And then they just fit it in when they need to. They must have some conversation.
But their benefit is so positive from it.
Yeah.
That is a whole different person who literally, like you, it's like breathing.
Yeah.
You couldn't imagine not doing it. That literally is that type of person.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, when we, as in millennials, were growing up, we were surrounded by our parents, schools, the media with what it was, like commercials and stuff, with this push for us to get outside and be active. I mean, what kid doesn't look forward to recess?
Yep.
I mean, I think there was a whole show back when I was younger called Recess or something.
I think
like
it
that.
was. It was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was good. I remember spending hours outside with friends reenacting what we had seen in our favorite movies when I was growing up.
That's cute.
I mean, playing like dueling with lightsabers and, casting spells and whatever, like all of the stuff. We'd be outside for so long, it would be pushing dark before we were compelled to come inside for dinner and probably finish our homework too. And then in the summer, I practically lived in my local swim club. Shout out to Seven Oaks, go Marlins, and being excited about away camps. We grew up with this mentality of activity being a source of fun and escapism. Sure, we had video games and books and movies, but what gave all those entertainment sources context was our ability to take it with us into our world and live out our fantasies. So it shouldn't be much of a surprise when we find statistics that say upwards of 80% of millennials label themselves as active, as opposed to that of 60% of boomers. That being said, I grew up in a suburb of Raleigh, which isn't that big of a city. Mm-hmm. Now, you grew up in a bigger city.
Oh, yeah. Philadelphia,
what was
Pennsylvania.
your experience like? Did you feel like you could do things like I described growing up during your time?
It was the same. I mean, I honestly feel like childhood is childhood. And we didn't have anything in the house to do. So everything consisted of being outside. And for us, the rule was you came home when the street light came on.
Oh.
That was just, everybody in the whole block knew the street light came on. We all, that was the end of our time outside.
Yeah.
It was the same. We played with chalk in the street, like this cool game called Scummy.
Okay.
And it had skulls involved, and then you could play Scummy, and we did hopscotch. But yeah, it was the same. I mean, there was nothing for us to do in the house. Like you had movies and video games were a thing in the house. I mean, we had one television. There was you didn't have televisions plural to go watch things, and there was no cable. So outside was the better place to be all around.
Such a romantic sounding concept of you don't come home until the streetlights come on.
That was life.
For some reason, I just instantly think of Hey Arnold. I don't know if you've ever seen that show or heard of that show, but it was a cartoon where the characters grew up and played baseball and kickball and whatever in an urban environment.
Yes.
And I don't know why that just sends me right to that.
But that was like your clock. That was our clock because nobody had a watch on or anything. Yeah. That was our clock.
And you're right. We nowadays there's video games is a big thing, especially with younger boys of source of entertainment. And I think that when I was in my younger teens and around 10, 11, 9, around that time, we were outside a lot, especially with me and my cousins who were both boys. So we would always do stuff together. We were very close, or are very close. We would always be outside and reenacting games or shows or whatever. And then as we got a little bit older into our later teens, we started to come more inside a bit more, and the video games became more of a thing, and
they probably started being better quality.
Yeah, and my aunt or my mom would be like, "Can you guys go outside and do something?"
Yeah,
and we'd be like, "Yeah, we will." After this and whatever, we still did. We were all athletes growing up, so
cool.
We all had that athletic mindset, but we also had the video games, and we could also, as I said earlier, take that entertainment and take it outside.
Fun.
Knowing that we kind of had similar attitudes growing up.
Well, your parents are boomers.
Right.
I mean, and so they were probably raised the way my parents raised us, as I'm a boomer.
Yeah.
So,
we were similar in how we grew up childhood-wise, so why did you stop?
It's interesting. We talked about this offline where you said, why did I stop? It wasn't a start or a stop thing. In childhood, you do pretty much as you were told. You played outside because you were told to go play outside. Okay. So you weren't consciously being active. That's an adult mindset. This, being a child is being a child. So when childhood was over, that purposeful playing is not a priority anymore in your life. Now you're graduating high school, you're going to college, and you're getting a job. And the thought or the word play, it doesn't come into play, no pun intended. That, that was just, childhood was childhood, and that was over now.
It's interesting that you said there wasn't like a conscious thought of like activity, like viewing play as activity. Your parents just, either told you to go, or you just went outside because that was just what you did.
That's where everybody else was.
So that's kind of, if you remember from episode 1, that aspect of Wu Wei, where you were just doing what was natural. You weren't thinking about or forcing what was unnatural or with intention. You were just doing
exactly
whatever felt natural to you.
Right.
Which is interesting because it's so interesting how that natural attitude or inclination to be active and to play goes away as we grow up. As if like growing up, like we're just getting more mature. It's not like anything necessarily changes.
Well, no, that's not true. Everything changes. You're trying to make a life in this world, and you're really trying to figure out who you are. Because a lot of times as a child, you're doing as you're instructed or as you're told. It's not an individualistic thing happening when in childhood. Everybody went out and played. Everybody went to the pool. Everybody went to the park. And then as you get older, you're starting to figure out, who am I? Now that shifts your entire energy.
Right, but it's not like you as a person necessarily changes, just more of like things around you as you get older.
I'm going to agree to disagree.
Okay.
You completely change as a person.
Well, that just may show our generational difference as well, because for me, I just feel like, I'm 31, but like when I was 29, a lot of the times I felt like I was still 15. Nice. I did not feel my age.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things I still like to enjoy, the media I like to consume, right, are all still things I started enjoying when I was 12.
Yeah, and I get that.
But they change. But my perception of those things that I enjoyed as a kid change as I get older, and they improve.
Look, we're ever evolving. So it was interesting when you said to me, well, why did you stop? It's like, never started it. It wasn't like it was my idea. That was what I was told to do. So I did, I did what I was told. And it was a good time, but it also was a specific time in life. It wasn't, I didn't even know who I was. You're like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. You don't even know who you are yet.
There also might be safe to say that millennials have a better sense of work-life balance. We understand when it's time to work, and then when it's time to close and exit, and then check out, and then do other things that
Your
are not work.
Your generation is absolutely probably the first generation who's ever drawn that line in the sand, because that was not our thing. Like, we worked till we dropped dead practically. Right. There was no work-life balance. You worked. You know what I mean? Period. That whole concept is so new. It's so new. But your generation, you're the ones that are so adamant about it, which is what drives boomers absolutely crazy when you're both in the workplace together. Right. Because you have such a priority to make that happen, whereas we were just like, we never thought about that happening.
And it may be confused as like laziness or apathetic.
Oh, I'm sure it could be.
Because we have a sense of...
And not that it is, but absolutely it can be perceived that way. But you guys are adamant and you stand in it. And you have a line in the sand. Right. And I'm not mad at that. You guys may even live longer than we're going to live because of that.
Yeah, I think it's important that we have that, because it allows us to have other interests and things, especially with activity.
And it's purposeful. So that's not a bad thing.
And social media also really helps promote that sense of distinction between work and...
Social media, actually, I think that's such a key thing to say, because in social media, you see other things that you could be doing. Right. And then you see, like, well, I want to make time for those things. That was a void that we had. We didn't see anything else that we could be doing. It was just like work to keep moving up and making more money and taking taking 2 weeks of vacation a year.
That's right.
And that was pretty much it.
Yeah, it's so weird. I mean, I saw someone the other day on YouTube who was like a all-star like West Coast swing dancer.
Okay.
This guy who like does these amazing moves with these women.
Yeah.
And then I looked at his page and like, he's a freaking aerospace engineer. How does aerospace engineering and West Coast swing dancing have any interlap? Like on the surface level.
Priorities, though. He loved that and he loved that.
Right, but that's
he
the
made
thing.
time
Like,
for
I
it.
wouldn't know that was a possibility
Yeah.
to have such polar opposite interests
Yeah.
without something like social media to like show me
very
that
interesting.
you can have a job, but that job does not necessarily
Have to be your life.
have to be your life.
And
Yeah,
that's,
exactly.
And I think we were raised where our work was definitely our lives. I can
Yeah.
speak for that in many of my friends.
And you mentioned your friends as well. So you mentioned that as a kid, you were grouped with kids who did things together. So you like went to
did
lunch
everything
together,
together.
you went to class together, you went to the museum together.
Yep.
Right? Now we have that as millennials
Yeah.
in the fitness area. Like there's, hey, do you want to go to yoga class with me? Hey, there's this running group that you want to go.
Completely
Like,
something
can
is-
you go with me so I'm not by myself?
That is a foreign concept
Right.
to my group of friends.
Yeah, I mean, I remember my brother, he would go on like these like 20-mile bike rides, and then like halfway through the cycle, they would stop at some brewery and have a recovery beer in the middle of the ride and then ride home. Like,
But that just goes to show you how different things are.
right, so we're building in this social aspect of fitness.
Yep.
It doesn't sound like you necessarily had.
It wasn't a thing. It wasn't
Right.
a thing. Like I have nothing to compare that to.
And we can also we can only do all of that because of the existence of the internet.
I really believe that because it shows you possibilities. It's so much positiveness to it, but then it's also that other part of it that you feel like I'm not worth anything because I'm not living my life like that. So it does have the pros and the cons of seeing all the things.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
and also travel too. Like seeing people like hike these amazing places or swim or whatever, and you're like, oh my god, I could never do that because I'm not in that good of shape.
Or I want to quit my day job and go off and do that. It's like, no.
Right. Like there's this whole segment of YouTube and like social media about like van life.
Yeah.
Have you heard of that?
I've seen it.
I was seeing so many like high schoolers or like college people who dropped out of school to go live in a van, or some guy like bought an ambulance for like $5,000.
Yeah.
And he lives in
Makes
the
it his
ambulance. But
Yeah.
they can also remote work.
Yeah.
And you can only do that because of the internet.
I know.
And a Wi-Fi connection. You can now live anywhere
Yeah.
and work any job.
I mean, and that's like such an amazing thing that this world offers now.
Like 10, 15 years ago.
No, you got your butt up, you got in your car, you took the subway or whatever you did.
Right.
And you got yourself physically to work.
Right. I mean, I never would have had a concept of thinking about that. And you especially,
Oh my gosh.
as still a working adult,
Yeah.
that concept would have been like, what?
know.
You live in a van and you do work at a Starbucks?
I know.
How do you live?
I know.
It's just so interesting how, and then also like even further, like first when the internet was started, like you couldn't say it was much more than just a place to use email.
Well, that was AOL.
Right.
It was like that was it. You had an AOL account and you checked your email and you logged off.
That's right. You had to buy, the bandwidth or whatever to
Yeah.
actually use the internet. And now it's almost as much of an essential resource as water.
I can remember a time without it, but you can't.
No, I mean, I knew I was alive briefly before my parents had gotten a computer, but I don't know a time when I never had access to one. Like, I mean, in middle school, we had like typing classes on the keyboard.
Wow.
I mean, I'm sure you guys had it with like
In high school, we had typing on a typewriter.
typewriter. Yeah.
An actual typewriter.
I mean, I had...
They're in museums now somewhere, I'm sure.
Right. There was the funnest game it was like you were in a spaceship and you were shooting asteroids. Every time you typed something correctly, it would blow up an asteroid.
What?
And I was in like 5th grade and I was like, oh my god, this is the coolest thing ever.
And that's how you learn.
That's how I learned how to type. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It was the coolest thing.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But you remember a time when you didn't have a computer.
Of course,
and you
that was most
remember
of my life.
bringing it in.
1999, I think I got my first home computer. So 1999. So, you know, I'm born in 1961. Do the math. That's how much of my life there was no such thing as a computer.
Right. Or
I
internet.
remember when people had box phones.
Oh man.
They carried box phones
Or in their car.
in their cars.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I dated a guy who had a box phone.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I remember a lot of just not having access to anything. And it was fine because there was nothing out there that you needed. You didn't realize you don't know what you don't know.
You didn't realize you didn't know it.
Right.
You're right.
Oh my gosh, you don't realize what you don't know. It's just like now the world seems so small, and you have access to so much in relations to anything that you want to learn for yourself. It's right there for you to learn. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So look, the interesting thing is the way that you guys, when I say you guys, I mean millennials, adapt and digest and look at so many things instantaneously. Like the amount of information that you can consume and, you know, basically analyze is really astounds me. It kind of blows my mind. And I envy that a little bit about you guys. I mean, you take in information quicker than anything that we ever had. Literally, right now in the world, there's 3-year-olds that are practically out there writing code. I mean, these kids are moving so fast on their iPads and things. When you watch them, you're just like, my God.
Yeah.
You know?
We've been trained to process information.
It's a no-brainer.
In a different way. Yeah.
I mean, you want things fast. You want a lot of information coming at you. It does not overwhelm you. You know, it's actually the way that you like to receive the information.
Well, when I click the mouse on something, my computer better do it like that. Otherwise, I'm like, oh my God, why isn't it doing it now? Hurry up.
Yeah, it is definitely a hurry up.
We have a sense of impatience that sometimes does not help us.
But you have a stat here that is really interesting and a lot of people might not be aware of.
Yeah, so millennials were born between 1981 and 1996. We're also known as Generation Y, but no one ever says that.
Yeah, nobody ever says that.
And we were born the turn of the millennium, so Y2K, all that. And we were raised in an economically stable and technologically advancing society. That sounds about right.
Yeah.
And then I remember when I got my first iPod Touch and I was walking around putting it in my sister's face and be like, ha, I've got a computer in my pocket. Ha, ha, ha. And she was only having like an iPod, like when you had to actually scroll your thumb around the circle.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
That always, I mean, even to me, that seems like a lifetime ago.
It does.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And now let's put it in perspective. I graduated college back in 1983, and I literally, the entire 4 years that I was there, was writing my term papers. I wasn't typing them. It wasn't required. There were no computers at school. I hand wrote them and turned them in.
Your final, like, this is going to make you graduate.
Paper.
Wow. On pencil or pen?
No, it was in pen.
Oh, okay, good. What kind of quill did you use?
Oh my God. Okay, now let's not go back that far.
And now we're wearing computers on our wrists.
Yeah, we are.
So there's been this unprecedented surge of information and access to content and communication in the last 2 decades. I mean, the telegraph and airmail made communication a lot faster, but what's happened with the internet has expedited things at a rate that makes my head spin, even my head spin.
Yeah, like not only has information spread, but stuff like TikTok and Instagram has made the internet more entertainment based than education based. I remember how much time it took for me to do research back when I was writing papers, you know, for school. I had to go to the library. I had to look stuff up in encyclopedias.
By candlelight.
Almost. But literally now you can just Google anything that you want to know in seconds, which is just remarkable.
And I'm so glad you mentioned there's an emphasis now on entertainment more than information or communication.
Or education.
Yeah. Because, I mean, when stuff like Facebook started out, I mean, like the most basic of the social medias, you know, platforms.
The start of it all.
it started out as kind of like a dating site or a way of keeping in touch with people around the world.
Yeah, the funny thing is, it was innocent enough. It started out as
Yeah.
something nice and light and innocent,
Mm-hmm.
but like they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and Mark Zuckerberg had good intentions. It was a wonderful thing until it wasn't.
To try and
know?
connect people, yeah.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
a wonderful thing until it wasn't.
And there's this abundance of readily available information now that's blending with entertainment.
Yes.
And now we have influencers who are, well, influencing
Yep.
swaths of younger people into doing stuff for the memes,
Yeah.
quote unquote, or for the likes.
Yep.
Or just because they want to jump on a trend.
Yeah.
Especially with fitness stuff. There doesn't seem to be much emphasis on, and not now, okay, I will say not all influencers or all social media platforms
No. We're
want
not gonna,
just entertainment.
Yeah, we're not going to lump everybody together, right?
Because there are people who also do want to promote some kind of scientific, method to an exercise or research or studies.
Or there are people out there who are just like you. They're just great trainers, and if you find them, they're legit.
Aw.
So it's not everybody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So what I'm noticing, it's interesting with my own circle of friends. It's kind of funny, and we joke around about it. That how it's 10 o'clock. I'm gonna go to bed because I'm a grandpa. It's funny. There's irony in the humor because we're in our late 20s, early 30s. We act like we're middle aged, but we don't have to pay for it physically. Does that make sense?
No.
We still are young.
Yeah, very.
But it's funny to pretend like, I'm 50, like my back hurts.
Oh.
And not actually have our back hurt because the next morning or the week after, our back's going to feel better.
So you guys actually joke like that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God. Well, I'm going to say this. Welcome. Because all of you are in the beginning of change. In your 30s, it starts that slow, gradual progression of this thing called aging. And the little signs of aging are tiredness, some aches and pains that you didn't have in your 20s, and a lack of energy. That really is where it all starts. And how lucky are you to even be aware and conscious of that? That somebody's actually talking about that in the world. Because that was never a conversation in my time about anything was going to change. You just felt like you were always going to be great. You did not have a thought about being anything other than fine.
Yeah, I think we are more than aware of
Yeah.
aging.
And that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing.
Huh, interesting. And that being said, I think it's important for you, the listener, to remember that if you're in this second phase of habit change, that right now you're researching different methods of getting healthier, take advantage to all the free access you have on the internet. You're actually entering at a good time.
I believe that. I totally believe that 1,000%.
Yeah.
You can sit down and read up on anything that personally might be something that you want to achieve or a challenge that you have. You can find yourself in so many avenues. You can find yourself in personal stories. You can find yourself in medical stories. You can actually find the information now and help put things together for moving forward. And it's just wonderful.
But if you think about the fact that social media has given way to a more egalitarian cultural norm around the principle of healthy at any weight, it's a huge plus that now you see all kinds of body types and ethnic backgrounds represented in media and advertising.
And I absolutely love that. It's so long overdue. And to see yourself represented in something that you're wanting to do or wishing to do, it really does make all the difference. You know, it's a reference point where you can say, okay, that's possible. That's possible for me to do that. I see it. I see multiple examples of it.
Which kind of goes back to the whole, like, the group aspect, the social aspect. If you see people like you doing the thing you want to do, it'll be easier for you to do that as well and join in.
Totally. You're more inclined to go into it feeling like, okay, this is possible. Absolutely.
Right.
I believe that. Absolutely.
Because it's especially starting out, it's really hard breaking into something like the fitness realm. If you are new, if you're insecure, And if you don't see people who are like you
Yeah.
experiencing the same things, or at least know
Yeah,
what
you
it was
figure
like,
it's not for you.
yeah,
Right.
it's hard for you to approach other people who maybe are farther along, right, and get them to kind of help you.
Yeah.
I mean, I enrolled in YouTube University when I first started out strength training as a freshman in college. And back then, all I had was P90X and a very patient and encouraging roommate. Shout out to Matt Norman.
When you said that to me originally, you said YouTube University. I kind of was like, is that like really a thing? Because, you can get all kinds of certificates online now. So is that really, you can go through a course of something, study and get paper for it? And you were like, no.
I mean, you probably could just go on like Canva and like create a YouTube University Presents. You probably could.
but then you kind of explained to me, it's really just about you kind of hyper focus on all the information about stuff that you're interested in, and you do learn a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, learning a lot, but you're so motivated to learn about something that you're interested in.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily need to be about fitness.
No,
it
whatever.
could be about the most obscure hobby or whatever.
Yes, and you can find it.
There's more than likely chance you can find it on the internet somewhere. Someone's made a video on it.
Yeah.
But for my exploration back in like early 2010s,
okay,
it's like 2011, 2012, I had started watching people like Scott Herman, the buff dudes, Omar Isuf, and then eventually Jeff Nippard. They were some of the earlier people who were shaping the online fitness realm.
Okay, cool.
And then, so even when I was in my action maintenance phase at that point, having a year or so of training under P90X and just doing whatever I wanted, random workouts,
right,
I was still looking up new things. So I never really left the research phase.
Yeah.
I never left phase 2 because you're always trying to find the new cutting edge thing that may help you up find new gains. So you never stop learning, digesting, and testing new methods of pushing yourself to become your best version. And their information is out there. It's free for you all to have and to look for it.
Yep. It's easier than ever, honestly. The first thing you try might not be the thing that works for you, so don't be discouraged by that. Or it might not even be something that you like. So just keep exploring. I mean, this is when group classes are helpful, and maybe linking up, with a friend who's doing something that seems interesting to you. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to switch it up if you find the first thing you land on is really just not getting you excited about going to even do it. I've learned you need to do what you like as well as what you're comfortable with. It's nice to follow a friend when you're learning to do something new and get some guidance of something maybe that they already have experience with. But if you find that you don't look forward to doing it, I mean, even if it's with a friend, chances are you're probably not going to stick to it on your own. So, you kick it. It's like, when you buy, back in the day, they would say, you kick some tires when you go to a new car lot. So I'm going to kick the tires. Like, kick some tires with different things as you're starting again, especially if it's been something you've never done, or it's been years since you've done anything like with physical activity. So
yeah, you'll never get that degree from YouTube University.
But no, you really need to understand the first thing you try, you might not fall in love with, and that's okay. Don't let that discourage you. So when it comes to fully utilizing the internet, there are people my age that are super comfortable with taking advantage of all the lanes of information out there, and they go on, they have a good time with using all the different kind of apps and all. And on the other hand, I have a bunch of friends that just don't care. I mean, they are not about going on to YouTubes and Instagrams and TikToks of the world. They just don't. They just have no interest. And it's so funny, when I got to thinking about that, I was like, it's kind of a nice freedom to have, because me personally, I do suffer from FOMO. And if any boomers are listening and are not aware of FOMO, FOMO, is fear of missing out. I actually have FOMO now. So if I'm offline for, more than a few days, it really is gnawing at me as to what's been going on. And not just in my personal circle, but just in the world itself. I actually have gotten to the point recently that I'm so concerned about that I put timers on my social media viewing when my phone shuts off. Like I just kind of don't want to feel like I'm chained to that feeling that, God is missing out on something. So I'm really trying to like spoon feed myself, like where I look at it as an activity that's for enjoyment and not something that I start to get a little anxiety about if I'm not doing it.
Now that is discipline.
Listen, it's I just want to feel like I'm stronger than just that desire. That's kind of it can be an addiction. Like, this thing is no joke. The internet is no joke. There's so much out there that you can just doom scroll until you fall asleep every night. And it can be the first thing that you look at when you wake up in the morning. I started leaving my phone downstairs. Not bringing it up to the bedroom. I just don't, because anybody that needs to get me in the middle of the night can call my husband's phone. And he's constantly attached 24/7, so they'll reach me. And I just try to put things in place so I feel like I still have control.
So that's a boomer thing. I don't know many millennials who leave their phones outside their room.
My boomer friends last night, I was out for dinner, and they just looked at me like I had 12 heads. Like, what do you mean you leave it downstairs?
Where's your alarm?
And they were like, whoa! And I was like, I just have to feel like I'm in control of it.
Wow.
That's just my thing. So what I really would like to do now is go back and look at the lack of access to informations that we had. And I'd say we, I mean us boomers decades ago. I mean, truthfully, y'all, all this preparation and the things that we're talking about, if I had tried to gather any substantial amount of information back in my 30s, I would have been extremely limited. I don't even know where I would have had to go. Probably the library and maybe magazines. I definitely would have been looking at something out by Jane Fonda or Suzanne Summers, who were the activity, gurus of that time. And it was, honest to God, the beginning of the fitness craze. They made a fortune with the things that they had, the VCR videotapes and then the Thigh Master and all of that. But that kind of would have been my research would have just been, let me get a VCR tape and start trying to do this activity that I see, because that was basically, it was available on a mass level.
The whole stair-step thing with the sweatpants and the hair.
Yeah, like that was what you saw as how to get fit or how to get yourself in shape.
It's interesting too, because around that time in like the 70s, 80s, there was like people like Arnold and people like that, but they were all like either professionals.
Yes.
Or they were like Olympic athletes.
Yeah, they were professionals.
There didn't seem to be anything that was like for the masses.
And there wasn't.
And I remember my dad, he was, as I mentioned before, he's a marathoner.
Yeah.
So I, grew up like learning about Prefontaine and all those people and like the running, icons and the evolution of shoes and how at that time, in like the late 70s, 80s, around the time when Nike was coming out with like their waffle sole. Okay. And they were selling shoes for people, not athletes in college or the Olympics or whatever, or in a niche area of a sport. They were selling it to some 9-to-5er. Yeah. Right? That doesn't sound like that was really something that was possible before, where anyone could put on some shoes and go jogging or fast walking on the road, which before there wasn't really any kind of footwear made for asphalt. Yeah, you just wore like your regular bobo. We just call them bobos. You just wore your regular bobos. Okay. So now there was creating a sense of accessibility for adults to become more active. And making it normal. And making it... You didn't have to be trying to be in the Olympics or be a pro. Yeah, so that seems to be one of the biggest differences between you when you were 30 and me when I was 30, was that everyone, not just professionals, had the access to fitness or play. Yeah. And social media definitely gives us a lot more access. Complete access. Complete access. So let me share some stats with you, just to put things into perspective on how many of us boomers are now navigating this new world that we live in. Okay.
First off, if you don't already know, folks, the term baby boomer is often used to refer specifically to the post-World War II, which is 1946 to 1964, baby boom in United States and Europe. And there's an estimated 78.3 Americans that were born then. I myself was born in 1961. So according to JAMA, International Medicine, boomers are far less fit than their parents were at the same age, and more likely to have diabetes or high blood pressure. So today, 35% of boomers regularly exercise, and 52% of us have no routine at all. So that tells you something.
Interesting.
That tells you something right there. Also, another sobering fact is by the year 2030, about 60% of boomers will experience more than one chronic health condition.
Uh-oh.
And the source of that information is the American Hospital Association. As it is, 62% of those between the ages of 50 and 64 currently have at least one chronic condition as a result of obesity, such as high cholesterol or heart disease. And that source is the Trust for America's Health. And it's also estimated that by 2030, around 25% of boomers, so it's 25% of the 78.3 million of us, will have diabetes. And
That's a lot
that
of
source
people.
is the American Hospital Association.
That's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people, and we're talking about this access to information, and I really feel like a lot of why things are so chronic is because the lack of information we had to turn it around early enough. I personally have 2 chronic conditions. I've had them for the better part of my adult life. Literally in my 30s is diagnosed with high blood pressure and high cholesterol. So I wasn't overweight. I didn't have a necessarily stressful or crazy life. I mean, some of this is probably inherent because I am African American and we seem to have a higher, percentage of risk for that. But I mean, I was thin as ever, and I would have never thought that there was something going on that at that point, possibly had I had the right information, I could have reversed. I really think I wish I had just had the information so I could give that a try. Now that I know and understand so much more about chronic conditions from my own personal experience, what I really wish is that in our healthcare system, just as a whole, once you're diagnosed with a chronic disease such as high blood pressure or high cholesterol, and it's not hereditary, that doctors would not only treat you with the appropriate medications, but also require that you get help adjusting to healthier habits in your lifestyle to help, treat the condition as well. So, I mean, because the appropriate changes in your habits definitely can lessen you being destined just to be on medication for the rest of your life.
Yeah, not ideal.
It's not ideal, but it keeps you alive, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But it just wish that the information had been more readily available to maybe, show you ways that you could reverse it. So, with that being said, we're really at a disadvantage, I think, back as we were coming through about the things that we just didn't know. You don't know what you don't know.
For boomers, it's not too late to take action, to continue doing those things you love doing, like travel or sport. My clients with grandkids tell me that one of the reasons they want to keep up resistance training or start it again is so they can keep up with their grandkids, right, and their families, right? They can go on trips and have fun and not have FOMO. Like
I like to say, stay upright, just stay standing.
Yeah.
Your stability really is affected as you age. It's amazing.
There's this different expectation, I think, with grandparents who they want to keep going, where before it was kind of like, they're just going to hang out in the house and whatever. Like, they're not going to be active part of the family, or they're not expected to keep up with kids.
Right.
and play.
And again, because you can see all the possibilities in the world to travel and stay active with your children and do the Disney World thing and all that, you're like, well, let me work so that I'm able to do those things. But again, it's all seeing it and seeing like, I can have that. I want that. You know, whereas our grandparents, when you look back at pictures of them in their 50s and 60s, they looked old. I mean, they looked old, and they weren't. But it was just that mentality that, you know, now you've had your kids, they've left the house, and you just don't do anything.
But y'all are also living longer.
Yeah.
As well. I think by a whole, you guys have a longer life expectancy. And then we'll have a longer life expectancy as medicine and things improve, right? Our longevity will also improve than in previous centuries.
That's true. So as boomers, we're less likely than our elders to describe our health as excellent or very good, and reported more difficulty walking several blocks or lifting objects heavier than 10 pounds. As boomers, we also have more chronic health problems, such as high blood pressure and diabetes, like I mentioned early, and we have unhealthy cholesterol levels. So I truly have to believe that if we knew better, we would do better. I just really believe that, had there been more accessibility to information about preventing or lessening or turning these things around at the first sign, that a lot of us would not be in this shape, would not be in this condition. I really, truly believe that. I mean, I can remember the only information I got from my physician back in my 30s was to cut out salt. One sentence, that's all I had. Here's your medication. So I do think, you know, the accessibility of information is just a wonderful thing right now. And I'm glad it's here.
So I want to point out how crazy it is that as millennial, I am the children of, we are the children of boomers. We are the product of y'all. So whatever habits or lifestyles or points of view that your generation had, we adopted because we didn't know any better as we grew up. And now in our maturation, in our adulthood, we have the chance to decide for ourselves whether or not we want to continue with what we've learned or to try other things and expand and refine the habits that y'all had at the time.
And that's so much power that you guys have that I hope you recognize is that you see what we did, you see how we are, and now you have the information, understand how you can do things differently or better. And take the parts of us that you like, but the parts of us, like, you know, some of these stats, you don't need to have those same stats because you understand that you have the freedom to change that. We just kind of went along with status quo. And despite our accessibility and the availability of information on healthier living, a lot of us still don't do much about it. So even though we still we have the power to change what we've learned, youth blinds you to what you shouldn't be doing. And it does, because right now nothing hurts, everything's fine. Like,
kind of.
You only change things when you're presented with a reason. Or something's uncomfortable, or something hurts, or all of a sudden something's just not the way it used to be. You're not there. You guys are simply living your lives right now. And I maybe that's just the way the human nature works. You know, we don't get alarmed to change anything unless we're unhappy with something. What's to be unhappy about at 31 years old? I mean, life is just but everything is just really getting started. So you're not trying to undo anything because nothing's wrong. You know, there's nothing wrong for most 31-year-olds, except for you have, you know, maybe some debt. I feel sorry for you guys for that. You know what I mean?
I think nothing is wrong, but I think we're also trying to take full advantage of just being younger. And some of us just don't think about, you know, what's coming up next. So
you guys are definitely the generation that's getting married much later. You're buying homes much later. You are doing a lot of those big adult things much later because you are focused on other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So even though, our parents may be pressuring us to check all the boxes, right?
Because that's what they know.
Because that's what they know.
Right.
Right. And to some extent, I think we are. But I think also other extents, we realize that we have, as we mentioned earlier, with like bus life and van life and remote working.
You have choices.
We have more choices to do
so many more choices.
other things. Right.
Oh my gosh. Easily. And do other things really easily and have access to how to do it. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, you know what? I think I'm going to go do that. Let me look up what are the steps. Where do I start? Mm-hmm. What's the middle look like? What's the end? How much do I need? I mean, everything is just right there.
As y'all are going on this investigation of different options, looking at and trying things out, be aware that you have access to groups and people who want the same things.
Yes. Be painfully aware that you're not ever alone unless you just choose to be. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like I was just saying, everything is there at your fingertips. You can find exercises or health plans for people who are introverted, people who are extroverted. I mean, literally, down to the most granular detail. You can put yourself in a position to accomplish your goals.
You can find an online fitness coach for busy soccer moms who are in their 40s who want a 30-minute workout.
There it is.
And you'll find somebody.
And you can find, someone on the other end for African-American women who have never physically been in shape, who want to get in shape, beginner's class. It honestly is just a plethora of tools, really good tools that are out there that you can take advantage of.
Because speaking as a health professional myself, right? If you guys don't reach out or if you guys don't make your interests known, then we're not working.
Yeah.
And I want to work.
I think my generation knows what they want, Cooper. They just don't necessarily know how to get it. They've tried so much at this point in life that hasn't worked. And I really mean that. I mean, this is not my first rodeo with a trainer or going to a gym or trying to eat healthy. It's not. But it's just at this point, we've done so many things well and successfully by the time you're in your late 50s, early 60s. I mean, you're good at your profession. You've raised your children. Maybe you're sending them off to college. You're very accomplished. And then the idea of starting something from scratch that is just so foreign to you, but you realize you need is overwhelming. And it's not something that we look forward to. And the idea of failing at something is really bottom of our list. I mean, we're, like I said, we're good at juggling and doing a lot of things really well.
Speaking of failing at things, I've seen a lot of older guys at the gym who are in their 50s or 60s who want to get in there and try and bench even just 135 pounds because that's what they used to do when they were 20 or 30 years ago. And they're like, God, and they grumble and they laugh it off because they're old and blah, 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 blah. But also, you might not have touched a weight since then. And there's been a lot of life in between 30 years and now.
Yes, things are different.
So you need to have a little bit more of a realistic expectation of what you can accomplish at your age with your lack of activity that you've had. And it's possible to get back to where you were, but it just needs to be more time and you need to be okay with working up to it.
And that's the thing is we always go back to what we did before without taking into account how very different we are, not just physically, but even mentally. That's when I say, if you can get professional help, get it. Get someone who can guide you and meet you where you are and put together a plan for you. That's the time that you reach out. That's not the time you go, because it sucks to go into a gym and hurt yourself.
Yeah.
Especially
when you're just trying to get back healthy again, and then you get hurt, and then you're like, oh well, I'm not gonna do that again because I got hurt. So you really do have to approach this very different, especially as a boomer. Like, you have to come at this from a reality of, where am I right now in my life? What are my limitations? It's a whole different thought process than it would have been when you were in your 30s and your 40s. You would have just joined a gym. Yeah.
Bam. You would have just jumped into the class, done your thing, went home, you were a little sore, This is different.
Yeah. And I appreciate that you boomers and, people around that age, have a limited amount of runway left. So their urgency is a bit...
Okay, Cooper, don't rub it in.
Your urgency is a bit more than people my age.
Yeah,
but that doesn't mean...
We want to age healthier.
Right. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't still take the time to come or to re-enter activity with haste.
Yeah.
Right? Take it slower and it will get better.
Yeah, just be patient. There's no end date. I don't know if we've said this, but there's no end date to changing a habit. Mm-hmm. You're just trying to change it, and it's going to take time.
To wrap this episode up, I will leave you, millennials, with this quote, which is, you have two choices: to evolve or repeat.
And you guys really have that choice. You really do not have to be the status quo.
Yeah, and I think we've covered very much how much more aware we are of the past and the tools we have to create a different future if we want it.
100%.
Yeah, I see a lot of people my age and a little bit older as well, in like their 40s or 30s as well, who want to do things right, but don't. Right, so they may recognize that there are some things that are wrong. And then when they express that they want to do something else or try and change it, but then they don't actually take any action on it. So are you going to continue to just sort of go in a circle of, phase one where you're just, bemoaning and whining about...
that can go on for a long time.
And it can, right? Exactly. So there has to be a point where you decide, are you actually going to make a difference in your life, in other people's lives? Or are you just going to repeat?
It's just all up to you. All we're saying is the information is out there. The help is out there more than ever. It can be free. You can pay for it, but it's all available.
Yeah.
So that's all we have for today, folks. Thank you so much for listening to the third episode of You Want Me to Do What? With Karen
and Cooper. You can find me, Cooper, on Instagram at @thepen_dragon fitness.
And you can find me, KK, on Instagram at winkwink854.
If you're loving this podcast, we'd be honored if you'd go ahead and like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If at any point in this episode you're related to something we talked about, we'd love to hear from you. So please share your story in the comments on YouTube or drop a line on our Instagram post for this episode.
So until next time, this is KK.
This is Cooper.
Bye.
Bye.